Jennifer Morrison scored 183 points in Fast Money on Family Feud. A solid score that meant her daughter Grace, playing second, only needed 17 points to win the $20,000. When Steve Harvey announced Jennifer's total, she smiled and nodded, the way contestants do when they're pleased but staying focused. Her daughter stepped up to the podium. Steve read the first question. Name something a parent does every night before bed. Grace, who was 24 and worked as an elementary school teacher, said without hesitation, check on their kids. It was on the board, worth 42 points. Steve read the second question. Name something you do when you can't sleep. Grace paused, then said quietly, call your mom to make sure she's still breathing. The audience laughed, thinking it was a joke. Steve's smile froze. Grace's face didn't change. She wasn't joking. Steve looked at the board, then back at Grace, then over at Jennifer, standing off stage. Jennifer's hand had gone to her throat. Steve put his cards down on the podium very slowly. He said, cut the cameras. His producer Carla rushed forward, shaking her head. Steve said louder, his voice completely flat, cut the cameras right now. The studio went silent in a way it hadn't all day. It was March 22nd, 2024, a Friday afternoon taping at the studio in Atlanta. The Morrison family from Portland, Oregon, was facing the Kim family from Houston in what had been a light-hearted, high-energy episode. Jennifer, 47, worked as a hospice nurse. Her daughter Grace and son Marcus, 21, were both there with Jennifer's sister Diane. They'd been making Steve laugh all game with their quick answers and playful teasing. The Kim family had been equally charming, both sides trading jokes between rounds. Steve had been in peak form, doing his signature reactions, working the crowd. Everyone thought they were taping a standard feel-good episode. The audience thought that was the peak. They were wrong. What nobody in the studio knew was that Jennifer Morrison had stage 4 ovarian cancer. She'd been diagnosed 8 months earlier, in July 2023. The doctor had said, it's advanced. We can try aggressive chemotherapy, but statistically, you're looking at maybe 18 months. Jennifer was a hospice nurse. She knew exactly what those words meant. She'd said them herself to families 100 times. She'd gone home that day, sat in her car in the driveway for 2 hours, then walked inside and told her kids they were having tacos for dinner, her voice completely steady. She didn't tell them about the diagnosis. Not that night. Not for 3 months. She kept going to work, kept doing the grocery shopping, kept asking about Grace's new teaching job and Marcus's college applications. She started chemotherapy in August and told her kids it was just some routine treatments for women's health stuff. Nothing serious. When her hair started falling out in October, she bought a wig that matched her natural color so perfectly that Grace and Marcus didn't notice for 2 weeks. When they finally asked why she was wearing it, Jennifer said she'd impulsively cut her hair too short and regretted it. They believed her. The medical bills started coming in November. Jennifer's insurance covered most of the chemotherapy, but there were gaps, co-pays, specialist visits, medications. By December, she owed $23,000 and had maxed out 2 credit cards just to keep up with the minimum payments. She worked double shifts when her body could handle it, sometimes going straight from an 8-hour hospice shift to a 4-hour evening shift at a different facility. Her boss had pulled her aside in January and said, "Jennifer, you look exhausted. Maybe take some time off." Jennifer had smiled and said, "I'm fine, just getting older." What she didn't say was that she couldn't afford to take time off because the bills were still coming, and she'd started calculating how much debt she'd leave her kids with when she died. She'd opened a life insurance policy in August, right after the diagnosis, and lied on the application, saying no when it asked if she had any recent cancer diagnoses. She knew it was fraud. She knew they might not pay out, but she also knew that without it, Grace and Marcus would inherit nothing except $50,000 in medical debt and a mortgage on a house worth less than she owed on it. Grace had noticed her mother was different. She couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. Her mom was always tired now, always said she was fine when Grace asked if she was okay. In February, Grace had been staying at her mom's house for a weekend and woke up at 2 a.m. to get water. She'd walked past her mom's bedroom and heard something that made her stop. It was crying, quiet and controlled, the kind of crying someone does when they're trying hard not to make noise. Grace had stood outside the door for 5 minutes, her hand on the doorknob, trying to decide if she should go in. She didn't. She went back to bed and lay awake until morning, her stomach tight with fear. She'd asked her mom about it the next day. "Mom, are you okay? Like, really okay?" Jennifer had laughed it off. "I'm fine, sweetie. Just a stressful day at work yesterday. You know how it is." Grace didn't believe her, but she also didn't know how to push harder without seeming invasive. So she started doing something she'd never told anyone about. Every night before bed, she called her mom. Just a quick call, 2 or 3 minutes. "Hey, just wanted to say goodnight." She told herself it was normal, just staying connected. But the real reason, the one she didn't say out loud, was to make sure her mom answered. To make sure she was still there. To make sure she was still breathing. Marcus had noticed, too, in a different way. His mom had always been the person who planned everything, who remembered birthdays weeks in advance, who kept the family calendar color-coded and perfect. But starting in January, she'd started forgetting things. Small things at first. She'd miss Marcus's college acceptance celebration dinner because she forgot what day it was. She'd forget to pay the electric bill, and they'd get a shut-off notice. She'd forget conversations they'd had 2 days earlier. Marcus had asked Aunt Diane if she thought something was wrong with Mom. Diane, who was younger than Jennifer by 3 years and worked as a real estate agent, had said, "She's probably just stressed. You know your mom. She takes care of everyone else and forgets to take care of herself." But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than stress. His mom's face looked different, thinner. The skin around her eyes looked bruised, like she wasn't sleeping. Her hands shook sometimes when she poured coffee. He'd asked her directly in February, "Mom, are you sick?" Jennifer had looked him straight in the eye and said, "No, baby, I'm not sick. I'm just tired." It was the first time she'd ever lied to him about something that mattered, and it felt like swallowing broken glass. Jennifer had applied for Family Feud in January, during a 3 a.m. shift at the hospice center when she couldn't stop thinking about the debt. She'd been sitting with a dying patient, a woman named Eleanor who'd been a school teacher for 40 years and was now leaving her grandchildren $80,000 in medical debt. Eleanor had said, half delirious from morphine, "I wanted to leave them something good. I wanted to be a blessing, not a burden." Jennifer had gone home that night and looked up game shows that gave away money. Family Feud's top prize was $20,000, which would cover almost half of what she owed. It wasn't enough to solve everything, but it was something. She'd filled out the application, recorded the audition video with Grace and Marcus and Diane, making jokes and acting energetic, even though she'd thrown up twice that morning from the chemo. She never thought they'd get selected. When the email came in February saying they'd been chosen for a March taping, Jennifer had cried for the first time in front of Grace. She'd covered it by saying she was just so excited and overwhelmed. Grace had hugged her and said, "Mom, We're going to win this for you." Jennifer had thought, "I'm doing this for you." The Morrison family had won the main game easily. Jennifer's answer to the final question, "Name something people say they'll do tomorrow but never actually do," had been, "Start that diet," which was the #1 answer and sealed their victory. Steve had laughed, the Kim family had clapped, and everyone moved into fast money. Jennifer went first and scored 183, which was excellent. Grace stepped up for her round, feeling confident, feeling like they were about to win this money for her mom, who'd been working so hard lately. But the real story hadn't even started yet. Steve had asked the second question. "Name something you do when you can't sleep." And Grace, without thinking, without planning to say it, had given the truest answer she had. "Call your mom to make sure she's still breathing." The words came out before she could stop them. The audience laughed because they thought it was sweet and funny, a daughter who was overly attached. But Grace's face went pale the second she said it. She realized what she'd just revealed. Steve's smile had vanished. He'd looked at Grace for a long moment, then at Jennifer, then back at Grace. He said, very quietly, "Say that again." Grace's voice cracked. "Call your mom, to make sure she's still breathing." Steve put his cards down. He said, "Cut the cameras." When his producer tried to object, Steve turned to her and his voice was hard. "Carla, I said cut them, now." The cameras stopped. The audience, confused, sat in silence. Steve walked around the podium, stood directly in front of Grace and said, "Why do you check if your mom's breathing?" Grace's hands were shaking. "I don't know, I get scared sometimes." Steve's voice got softer. "Scared of what, baby?" And that's when Grace broke. She said, "I think something's wrong with her. I think she's sick and she won't tell me." Her voice rose. "She cries at night and she thinks I don't hear it. She's losing weight. She forgot my birthday last month. She never forgets my birthday." Jennifer, standing off stage, had both hands pressed to her mouth. Diane had grabbed Jennifer's arm. Steve said, "Jennifer, come here." Jennifer didn't move. Steve said again, "Jennifer, come here right now." Jennifer walked slowly onto the stage. The studio was completely silent. 300 people stopped breathing at the same moment. Steve looked at Jennifer and said, very gently, "Are you sick?" Jennifer opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Grace said, "Mom?" And Jennifer Morrison, who'd been holding it together for 8 months, who'd lied to her kids to protect them, who'd worked herself half to death to try to pay down debt she'd never lived to see cleared, finally broke. She said, "Yes." Just that one word. "Yes." Grace's legs gave out. Marcus, watching from the family section, made a sound like he'd been punched. Steve Harvey, who'd been hosting Family Feud for 13 years and had seen almost everything, had to turn away from the cameras for a moment. His shoulders were shaking. But Steve wasn't done. He turned back to Jennifer and said, "What kind of sick?" Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper. "Ovarian cancer. Stage 4. Grace made a noise that wasn't quite a scream. Steve said, "How long have you known?" Jennifer said, 8 months. Marcus had pushed past the producer and climbed onto the stage. He was crying. He said, "Mom, why didn't you tell us?" Jennifer's face crumpled. "Because I didn't want you to have to carry this. I wanted you to just keep living your lives," Grace said, and her voice was sharp with anger and grief. "You've been doing this alone for 8 months?" Jennifer nodded. Grace said, the words coming out in a rush, "Mama, why do you cry when you think I'm sleeping?" Jennifer started sobbing. She said, "Because I'm scared. Because I don't know how much time I have left. and I don't want to leave you." The room held its breath. Even the crew members had stopped what they were doing. Hardened television professionals were looking at the floor. Steve said, "Let me tell you something." His voice was rough. He said to Jennifer, "I was homeless for 3 years. I lived in my 1976 Ford Tempo. I showered in gas station bathrooms. I ate food out of trash cans. And you know what the worst part was? It wasn't the hunger. It wasn't the cold. It wasn't even the shame. It was the lying. It was pretending to my family that I was fine when I wasn't. It was carrying that weight alone, because I thought I was protecting them." He stepped closer to Jennifer. "But here's what I learned. The people who love you don't want to be protected from your pain. They want to help carry it. Because that's what love is." Jennifer couldn't speak. Steve said, "You've been working double shifts to pay medical bills, haven't you?" Jennifer nodded. Steve said, "How much do you owe?" Jennifer hesitated. Steve said, "How much?" Jennifer said, $23,000. Steve pulled his phone out of his pocket right there on stage. He dialed a number, put it on speaker. A woman's voice answered. "Steve?" Steve said, "Pam, I need you to do something for me right now. I'm sending you information for a woman named Jennifer Morrison. She has $23,000 in medical debt. I need you to contact every single creditor and pay it off. Today. All of it." Pam said, "Done!" Steve hung up. The audience erupted, but Steve held up his hand for silence. He said, "We're stopping this right now." He looked at his producer. "I don't care about the game. I don't care about the taping schedule. We're done here." But Steve wasn't finished. He turned to Grace and Marcus. He said, "Your mom has been killing herself trying to take care of you. Now it's your turn. You're going to take care of her, whatever she needs. Doctor's appointments, treatments, bad days, scared days, all of it. You don't leave her alone in this." Grace was crying so hard she could barely breathe. She said, "We won't. I promise." Steve said, "And you," he pointed at Jennifer, "you're going to stop lying to them. You're going to let them help you. You're going to let them love you the way you've been loving them." Jennifer nodded, unable to speak. Steve said, "Because 36 years ago, I was you. I was the person trying to carry everything alone, and it almost killed me. Not the poverty, the isolation." He looked at the camera operators, who were still rolling despite his earlier order to stop. He said, "Everyone watching this at home, if you're carrying something you think you have to hide from the people who love you, you're wrong. You're not protecting them. You're robbing them of the chance to show up for you." Steve made one more call right there on stage, this time to his own oncologist, Dr. Linda Ramirez. He said, "Dr. Ramirez, I'm sending you a patient. Her name is Jennifer Morrison, stage 4 ovarian cancer. I need you to see her immediately. Pull whatever strings you need to pull. Get her into the best treatment program available. Cost is not an issue." Dr. Ramirez said, "I'll see her Monday." Steve hung up and looked at Jennifer. "You're going to fight this, and you're not going to do it alone." The Kim family, who'd been standing silently on their side of the stage throughout all of this, walked over as a group. The father, James Kim, said to Jennifer, "We're splitting the prize money. We don't care that we lost. Your family needs it more." His wife Susan was crying. She hugged Jennifer, two strangers holding on to each other like family. Steve looked at both families and said, "This is what this show is really about. Not the points, not the money. This." He gestured to all of them standing together. "This moment right here." They never finished the fast money round. Steve Harvey made the unprecedented decision to award both families the $20,000 prize anyway, plus an additional $10,000 to the Morrisons from his own foundation. When the episode aired 6 weeks later, it was titled, "The Answer That Stopped Family Feud." The clip was posted to YouTube and within 3 days had 95 million views. Within 2 weeks, it hit 240 million and became the second most watched Family Feud clip in history. The hashtag Grace's Answer trended for a week. Jennifer Morrison started treatment at Dr. Ramirez's clinic the following Monday. The new treatment protocol was experimental but showed promise. 3 months after the taping, Jennifer's cancer markers had dropped by 40%. 6 months later, she was in partial remission. A year after that episode aired, she was still alive, still fighting, still going to Grace's classroom to read to the kids once a week, and attending Marcus's college graduation. She used the prize money to take her family to Hawaii, something she'd always wanted to do, but never thought she'd live long enough to see. Steve Harvey established the Grace's Voice Foundation 6 months after the taping, specifically to help families dealing with hidden medical debt and the isolation that comes with terminal diagnosis. To date, it has paid off $4.2 million in medical bills for 327 families and connected them with support networks. Grace Morrison became an advocate for cancer patients' families, speaking at conferences about the importance of honest communication. She says, "My mom thought she was protecting us by keeping the secret. What she was really doing was dying alone. When she finally told us, we got her back." Marcus wrote an essay about his mother's diagnosis that was published in the New York Times and won a journalism award. The Kim family stayed in touch with the Morrisons and visited them in Portland twice. James Kim said in an interview, "We came to Atlanta thinking we'd win some money on a game show. Instead, we learned what really matters." The unedited footage of that moment, when the cameras kept rolling after Steve told them to stop, became required viewing in several hospice nursing programs as an example of the isolation that terminal patients and their caregivers often experience. Jennifer Morrison speaks to those classes now, telling nurses, "I was one of you. I knew better. I knew that isolation kills. But I still did it because I thought I was being strong. Real strength is letting people see you break." Steve Harvey, when asked about that episode, says it's the most important thing he's ever done on television. "We were supposed to be playing a game show. Instead, we saved a woman's life by making her tell the truth." Grace still calls her mother every night before bed. But now Jennifer answers with, "I'm still here, baby. I'm still here." The calls are longer now, filled with real conversation instead of just check-ins to make sure breath is still happening. Jennifer says the disease took a lot from her. Her hair, her energy, her certainty about the future. But it gave her something too. It gave her kids who know the truth and love her anyway. It gave her the gift of being seen at her worst and not being left alone in it. A phone pressed to an ear in the middle of the night. The silence before someone answers. The breath you hold until you hear their voice and know they're still alive. The unbearable weight of secrets kept to protect the people who needed the truth most. If this story moved you, call someone tonight. Not to check if they're breathing. To tell them the truth you've been hiding because you thought they couldn't handle it. They can. And carrying it together is lighter than carrying it alone.